Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Tech for Leaders podcast with Mazars. For those of you new to the podcast, welcome. And for those of you returning, welcome back. I'm Laura, your host. Today we are joined by one of the UK's most celebrated and inspirational businesswomen, entrepreneur and venture philanthropist, Dame Stephanie Shirley. Shaped by her experiences as a child refugee, fleeing Nazi Vienna at the age of 5 without her parents and coming to the UK, Dame Stephanie vowed to make her life one worth saving. In the early 1960s, against all norms of the time, she founded a women-only software company, pioneering new ways of working and opening doors for women in the workplace. 30 years later, the business was valued at over $3 billion and floated on the London Stock Exchange. She is now a successful venture philanthropist, supporting causes close to her heart and investing in the technology industry. She has given away the majority of her wealth and is the first person to drop off the Sunday Times rich list through philanthropic giving. Her life, career achievements, and generosity are truly remarkable. So let's welcome Dame Stephanie Shirley, who I'm delighted to be speaking to today as part of our Tech for Leaders podcast.
Great pleasure to be here, Laura.
So you're known for your many remarkable achievements in your lifetime, amongst them blazing the trail for women in the workplace and fighting for women's rights. So it's interesting that you're also affectionately known as Steve. Could you give us some background into this name?
Well, in the early days, before the days of email, I used to write lots of promotional letters to prospective customers. And I would do about 10, 12 a week, something like that, and basically got no reply. And I looked at my letter again. Could I improve it? And I did. But eventually realized that it was probably because of that double feminine signature, Stephanie Shirley, Shirley being my marital name. And my dear husband suggested that I use the family nickname of Steve. So I wrote the same sort of letters to the same sort of prospects, signing them Steve Shirley. And surprise, surprise, I began to get some replies, and I began to get some meetings, and I began to get some work.
It's just amazing, isn't it? And I mean, it may be jumping ahead in your story, but I think it brilliantly summarizes the biases that you've faced. And I was wondering, do you think these biases are still being faced by women in the workplace?
Well, sadly, yes, I do. But they are cultural rather than legal these days. Okay. I mean, my generation was fighting legal strictures that I couldn't work on the stock exchange, that I couldn't open the company's bank account without my husband's authorization, that I couldn't drive a bus or fly an aeroplane, all sorts of things. But nowadays, those are all gone. One is left with a cultural thing where young women still complaining vociferously that they're not listened to, that their ideas are adopted by others without recognition, and generally find a wealth of microaggressions they talk about, none of which is we're not talking about sexual aggressions here, but none of which is terribly serious, but together are debilitating, are patronizing, are de-energizing, so that women can't really do their best.
Yeah. How do you think women can overcome those microaggressions?
If you approach the microaggressions as microaggressions and laugh them off, that's a very nice way to defuse the anger that lies beneath them, because it is anti-women, it is anti-feminist, and not to take them too seriously. However, when I hear sexism, or for that matter, racism, or I do always challenge it. Mm-hmm. Even in a meeting, a big meeting, I say, hold on, you can't say that. Yeah. And I just say it as if I'd been quoting some HR premise somewhere. Yeah. So it's not easy. I don't think it ever will be easy. But I do think it needs to be treated lightly.
Yeah. And it's confident and bravery to stand up and say that.
Yes.
I guess going back a little bit to when you were growing up in the UK, You attended an all-girls school where maths wasn't on the curriculum.
Well, all the schools were unisex in those days.
Yeah, and you were so determined to pursue your interest in maths that you walked to the boys' school for maths and science lessons. Can you tell us about that? What sparked your interest in the subject?
Well, surprisingly, I find maths actually beautiful. It's rather like music. Mm-hmm. Listening to Bach is like solving a mathematical problem. So I was quite clear that I wanted to do that. And the school, I was in Oswestry, which is a border town on Wales, really did very well and arranged for me to go to the boys' school just for maths lessons. And that was a useful introduction to the sexism of the workplace, because they were all unisex. It was a girls' school and the boys' school, and they were just about within walking distance. I was always leaving one lesson and going to the other. But I did get qualified in maths eventually, and I still love it. And it's what has allowed me to contribute to the tech industry.
Yeah, it's interesting that you make that comparison between the kind of the way that the schools were set up then and the tech industry, maybe then and now. I'm interested, do you think more should be done to get girls interested in STEM at an early age? You know, what can companies do to kind of foster the future leaders, the female leaders?
Well, the future leaders are being recruited today.
Yeah.
And so one really needs a very open, welcoming, positively welcoming recruitment process. Mm-hmm. So that means one has to look at advertisements and how the headhunters are primed, are not primed, how the headhunters are briefed, mm-hmm. In order to make sure that women are not put off and that women are treated fairly. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who's not known for the work that she did for women, one of the things she did was to insist that all the shortlists included a woman. This is some years back. And that didn't bring a lot of women into positions of power, but it did bring them to the notice of other people. Mm-hmm. One of the things that women have to do, we have to be remembered for what we can do and what we are, not just for our gender or what we're wearing. Mm-hmm. I stress about appearance, of course, but you need to somehow distinguish yourself. What have you got that is different, that is interesting, that is novel, and novelty, innovation is just so important. It's no use doing what we did last month or last year, heavens, because it's all changed and you need to rethink all the time. And this is how women are valued.
Yeah. So it's improving that visibility and that kind of, that voice for women.
Yes, the voice for women. I know I got invited onto all sorts of boards and committees because they wanted a woman. It was at that time. And I didn't want to be a token woman, but I accepted and just made sure that my contribution was exactly the same as everybody else. Did I make the group fulfill its purpose? Did I help make that happen? Yeah. And that's what people remember, that when I was there, it went better.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I know that when you left school, you went straight into work. What kind of made you choose the computing industry?
Well, it almost chose me, really. I wanted to be the world's greatest mathematician and solve something called Fermat's last theorem. And it was very obvious at 18 that I wasn't going to be able to make that. I just didn't have that sort of intellect. But the computer industry came along. And basically, Laura, I just fell in love with it. It was really so exciting, so fresh, so new. Yeah. And in the early days, there were quite a lot of women there who got then squoze out. Really? As the thing became more professional.
That's really interesting, and it's interesting because that's exactly why I joined the tech industry now.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's still evolving. Yes. It's still different every day and every month, every year. Yes. So that's really
the
really
thing
exciting.
that I find even more exciting is that we know that there's no end.
Yeah.
Where as far as I took it, you take further, and you'll never be satisfied because there's always another stage.
Yeah. And what was it like being a woman in that industry at that time?
Pretty grim, actually.
Yeah, I bet.
I dressed like an honorary man in a grey skirt suit and a white blouse and a little black ribbon round my neck as a sort of vestigial tie. I crept around like a mouse, trying not to be noticed. You go into the staff canteen and, 200 male faces turn round to look, oh, God, there's a new woman coming. It wasn't funny.
Yeah.
But now I think I'm just proud of my gender, and nothing really throws me in a way. I've been to places like Saudi Arabia, where, again, I'm acting as a token man. I'm treated as a token man, allowed to do the things, but my goodness me, he covered my hair up and really tried to fit into the culture as best I could.
Yeah. And I guess it kind of moves on then to the next stage of your career, because you were frustrated by the lack of opportunities that there were. So you took it into your own hands and you decided to start your own software business in the 1960s. You set up what might be considered one of the first modern social businesses. You pioneered the concept of women returning to work after a career break and supporting flexible working. What drove you to do this?
Oh, well, I was one such, wasn't I, Laura? I knew the sort. I wanted to set up a company that was attractive to women. Mm-hmm. And so I built something that was attractive to me and assumed that a lot of other women would feel the same. Yeah. And what do women want? Every survey that's done shows they want two things: family-friendly environment and flexibility.
Yeah.
So my company was flexible in the extreme. You could work part-time, full-time, salaried, consultant, summer only. We pioneered 0-hour contracts. We called them min-max contracts.
Yeah.
All sorts of new things, and it became a differentiator. And one of the weaknesses was that we were remembered more for that's that all-woman company, rather than for what we could do. So one really had to fight that with being professional about what we did.
Yeah. I guess it's amazing because it's not fair really to take that amazing thing that you've created and reduce it down to it's the women only company. Yes. It's ridiculous. You're achieving amazing things with the software that you're selling and the new working ways, which actually are still new now. If you had set up that company today, that would still
be comment worthy.
It would it would still be so. It's amazing.
But I find that depressing that we're still talking about some of the same issues. I really do. I think the pandemic, ironically enough, has helped to make home working acceptable. And I don't think we'll ever go back to 100% office working.
No. And I'm very happy for that, to be honest, because I think it means you can have a much better balance of work and life, and especially for women in, career breaks or maternity leave, all of these things that are much easier sometimes to deal with at home.
Yes, I think also corporates are learning to deal with women in the sense of menstrual leave, in the sense of menopausal consideration, really looking after their staff when there are deaths, looking after staff when there are terminations or child deaths, which normally are just accepted as you're supposed to go back to work perfectly normally, and this is just not feasible.
Yeah, and I guess as well there's things being done for paternity leave as well, because if we don't give men more paternity leave, it's never going to give them.
They never take it.
Yeah,
they don't take it. Actually,
do they
not?
Don't
want to. Well, the figures are pretty low.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But at least it's shared. The law is there.
Yeah.
The law is quite fair.
Yeah. I guess going back to your company, I mean, I can't imagine it was an easy ride getting it from, a small company. I think I read online that you set it up with the equivalent of like £100 today.
Yes.
And now, it was valued at $3 billion. And when you sold it, you made 70 people millionaires overnight, which is, very impressive. I'm curious, is there any secret to your success that you could share?
Well, it's a very obvious secret, really, Laura. I surround myself with people who are much brighter than I am. And if you talk to any of my staff, they will confirm that.
Oh. So I guess that emphasizes the need for good people in companies.
Entrepreneurs particularly, and I think the corporate managers also, really have to have some basic skills, whatever they do. And there's a modicum of finance. Certainly everybody needs an understanding of marketing. But HR, if you're a manager, you really have to be able to manage people. Yeah. And one of the things I really regret about business was that the more successful it got, the more it became financial rather than humanized, and the less I enjoyed it, which is not what you would expect. You would think success would make it more and more enjoyable, but in fact it forced you into a role that I didn't like.
Yeah, you hadn't created the company to have that type of role. You created it to solve problems.
Well, I was going to write software.
Exactly.
And within a very short period of time, I wasn't writing software. I was dealing with the tax issues and the solicitors and
Yeah. And I guess coming forward to today, diversity and inclusion. Do you think this is still? What do you think about diversity and inclusion in the tech industry today? It feels to me like there's still quite a lot of work that we've got left to do.
There's a tremendous amount of work that's left to do. It's not bad for physical disabilities. It's very poor on race. It's appalling on women, considering we are 50% of the population. I think something like 20% of the tech industry is female. And it stayed round about that, despite the enormous efforts that people, myself and many, many others, have made to sort of bring women in and keep women in. There is an issue about that women are welcomed when they're young, shall I say, if they're young and pretty, but certainly welcomed when they're young, but as they want to work flexibly for family reasons, and as they start to aspire to management, then they are really less welcome and made to feel less welcome.
And I guess that speaks to I know we've got kind of a minority of women working in the tech industry, but there's an even smaller minority of those women that are in leadership positions.
Indeed, yes.
Which is, I guess another thing I actually wanted to ask you about was your books, because you've written a couple of books.
I'm so glad you asked.
I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about them.
Well, the first one is a memoir. It was published in 2012 and revised for 2018. It's called Let It Go, and there's a pun on the IT for it.
Brilliant.
And it's a memoir, not an autobiography, in that I'm talking correctly, but not factually all the time. Not, I went to Buckingham Palace on Thursday, the 3rd of April, and it was raining, but rather much more about how I felt about things, how I felt about clients, how I felt about losing business or whatever it was. So it's a memoir, not an autobiography. The book sold very well. It's also been translated into German.
Brilliant.
And in Spanish. So it is having an impact. And I aimed for it to be inspirational, in that I actually said on every page there's got to be something that makes you really think.
Brilliant.
And I think I achieved that. If you open it anywhere, there's some interesting stuff there. The second book was called So to Speak, and it's quite different. It's just a selection of the speeches that I've given over the last 40 years, and printing them out together with some commentary. And that hasn't sold so well, but it's a beautiful book. I should have it.
I had a look. Yeah, we've got a copy of it just behind me. It's gorgeous.
It was shortlisted for some design awards.
Really?
So no comment about the content.
Well, I guess when you were saying about the memoir, how there's substance on every page, that probably summarizes how you were so successful with the company, because everything you've done has been substance and there's always so much behind it.
Well, Laura, people remember entrepreneurs for our successes, obviously, and have we survived? But what really distinguishes the entrepreneur is the way we deal with failures. I have had lots of failures, national failures, project failures, people failures. And the thing is how you have to get yourself up and brush yourself down and give a big smile and go out and sell the next job. And I don't think that's appreciated, how so-called successful people have had to deal with failure. And that resilience in me comes, I think, from my refugee childhood.
Yeah. I think it's really important probably for listeners to hear that side as well, to hear that it's not a smooth ride to the top, and it's not.
Indeed, it is not.
And I think,
if it were easy, we'd all be millionaires.
Yeah. I guess I'm also curious about, so obviously you have this entrepreneurial spirit, but you're also a passionate venture philanthropist. I think back in 2009, you were the first ever government appointed ambassador for philanthropy, which is very impressive. And you've given generously to good causes, primarily in the fields of autism and IT. And in particular, the change you've instigated to make a more accepting and accessible place for people with autism is remarkable. I'm curious what led to you setting up those philanthropic ventures.
Well, I concentrate on things that I know and care about. And they're really only two: information technology and autism, which was my late son's condition. Yeah. And so by focusing on that, I'm able to sort of understand at least some of what's going on in the various things. What can business do to really attract the skills and talents of people with autism? At the moment, there's an estimated 10 billion a year lost employment for autism. That is people that should be paying tax, wanting to pay tax, but actually are claiming benefits. Mm-hmm. And that is something that needs to be remedied. Many autistic people have real skills that the industry needs. Yeah. There's some need to explain to teams what autism is, to make some slight physical amendments, perhaps to lighting or to the position of a desk or something like that. The only figures I've seen on those that retrofitting to get somebody with autism in costs about £200 per person, which is
phenomenal
noise.
Yeah.
One of my charities, Autistica, which is medical research into autism, has 40% of its staff are autistic, and its chief executive is also autistic, and he is doing great. When he was appointed, to be honest, I was a bit worried about his people skills, but he is wonderful, and he's proving to be really a valuable chief executive of what's now a medium-sized organisation. It employs about 25 people or something. Yeah. My biggest technical thing was I sponsored the Oxford Internet Institute.
Yeah, of course.
And that is from my pride and joy, really, because it concentrates not on the technology, but on the social, economic, legal and ethical issues that make the internet so it really is tracking what's happening into society. Yeah. And there is a parallel, I think, with my original company, Freelance Programmers, in that the emphasis is social rather than technical.
And I think what's so remarkable about you is that you're focusing on these really positive changes and using the successes that you've had to continue making this positive changes.
Thank you. I hope so.
It's really, I guess, I mean, how have you found running these charities as opposed to a company? Is it required different skills, same skills?
Very largely the same skills,
Yeah.
but perhaps a different attitude.
Yeah.
Because all the metrics are social rather than financial.
Yeah.
And business, one is so used to sort of quarterly results and so on, that to suddenly get into an organization where they have to be positive, but they're not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah.
What's happening in society at the moment, in the commercial world, is that we stop just talking about the bottom line, the financial results for the year.
Yeah.
We talk about a second bottom line, which is the social impact that an organisation is having.
Yeah.
And some organisations are even talking about a third bottom line being the environmental impact. Now that's very positive, and it's very businesslike. And certainly in philanthropy, I'm doing exactly the same sorts of things. Impact assessments, feasibility studies. This is the sort of thing that one does in business. And again, it all applies in philanthropy.
It's just a fabulous, I guess, example that you've created this charity, but you've also shown that you've put the people who you're trying to help at the forefront of that charity. Yes. And I think that's amazing. I think that's really, really lovely. I mean, as a summary, you've just achieved remarkable things across your lifetime. Is there one thing that you're most proud of?
The thing that I'm most proud of, Laura, is having taken my company into co-ownership. And that was the largest gift I ever made. Wasn't particularly valued. I mean, it was valued, but not really for what it was. It took me 11 years of slog. But, tenacity is one of the things that entrepreneurs have, and I certainly stick with it until it's a success.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think tenacity is definitely something that we can take from this and bring forward. I guess, do you have any final advice for business leaders, for future success, and in particular women?
I think in business, you've always got to be not just innovative, but disruptive. Something, if you're going to do something, do it big, something that really makes a difference. Yeah. Then make sure it's efficient. But the important thing is that it's worth doing the right thing rather than doing things right. Yeah,
100%. I guess the last thing that I did want to ask about, because you've been called a revolutionary. I'm curious, where do you think the technology industry is going? What's the future?
Well, the joy of the technology, of course, is that it's moving forward very fast. It'll never be as slow again. It's moving on, and there's no end point. Yeah. What you're doing will be out of date in a couple of years.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I guess all that's left to say for me is thank you, Dame Stephanie. Your story is truly remarkable. And I think it's going to inspire a lot of the people listening. So thank you very much for joining us.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. So this brings this week's episode of Tech for Leaders with Mazars to a close. Thank you very much for listening. And if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the series and leave a review to help this reach many more people and help the technology stay at the heart of the business community. So for now, we look forward to seeing you next time, but thank you very much. Take care and goodbye. Thank you.